Hi everyone, myself Dr. Lakshmi Prasad, working as an associate professor in the Department of Data Science in Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Hyderabad. In this video, I'm going to discuss about the basics of R programming. So, comes to introduction part of this R programming. So, for data visualization, so nowadays R programming is the software going to be used to make the data to visualize. So, through programming language. So, R is a programming language. So, and software environment for the statistical analysis and graphic representation and reporting. So, it was created by Ross Ihaka and Robert Gentleman at University of Auckland, New Zealand, and is currently developed by R&D Corp. So R is freely available under the GNU, and pre-compiled library versions are going to be provided for various operating systems like Linux, Windows, and Mac. The programming language was named as R, so based on the first letter of the first name of two authors, so Robert Gentleman and Ross Ihaka. So and partly play on the name of Bell Labs languages. So R is the programming language, and it should be a software environment for the statistical analysis, graphics, representation, and then reporting. So Ross Ihaka and Robert Gentleman is the person who invented this R programming, and so this one is should be a GNU General Public License and should be pre-compiled library versions are to be provided for various operating systems like Linux, Windows, and Mac. So the program name was designed from the first letters of the two authors and should be derived from the S language. So next one, Windows installation. So for that we have or 3.22 is the version for available for the Windows 32-bit and 64-bit. And so for that Linux installations, the R should be a binary for binaries for the Linux. So we should be use yum command to install R in Linux environment, and then have to launch the R as prompt here. So now we can use this install command at R prompt and install the required package. For example, if I want to use Plotrix package, I'm going to use for installing the packages on the web. So for this Windows installation, you have to make use of R 3.2 is the version available for 32 as well as 64-bit. And so .exe file is going to be allowed, and that should be able to run the software. And for the Linux installations, we are going to have for our binaries. So for that, you have to how to run the command here is so $yum is the command that is going to be used to install R and then install R. And so once that one is done, then we have to get the R prompt here, so we can able to execute the commands. And for the plots, drawing plots in Linux, so we have to make use of this syntax. So install dot packages Plotrix. It is going to be used. So the basic sentence what we are going to be here. So start with R prompt by make use of this R, or you can able to double click on that install file, then that one is going to be executed. And so for this, so my string I'm going to take and print out my string, so the output will be appear here. So after the command prompt, if I'm going to use my string, okay, so this is the string I want to print it out. So for that, just I'm going to write print of my string. So this is the variable I'm taking, and this is the word I'm going to be stored in this variable, and when I make use of this print, I can able to print it out. And next one is R script file. So for that, so it is going to be used in scripting files and execute these scripts with the help of R interpreter like R script. So my first programming in R language should be my string hello world, and print out my string, and we have to save it as test.r and execute at the R prompt. So for that we have type source of test.r, so that the output is going to be get it out here. Okay, so this is the string what one can able to use. So my first program, so my string, and print the string and save it as test.r. So if I'm going to run it as source.txt, then output is getting easily. Some of the baseful useful command that is going to be used here is help of word, so that you can able to know the description of the word. And next one is question word, that is going to get so the description of that word what meant for. And get wd off, so they should be getting knowing the working directory, and set w of this setting the working directory. And q off is the command for the quit from the RStudio, and source of file name, so you can able to execute the host script. So these are the main useful commands. So apart from that, we are going to have sync file name.txt, so we're able to direct the output into text file, and source of file.r, so executing the r1, and sync off, that means exit from the sync mode. So these are some of the basic useful commands. So help is the thing which is going to be know the description of the word, and dol question words, so that you can able to know the description about the word, what should be the syntax and how it should be useful. And get w is going to getting the working directory where we're going to work, and setting directory, so set it on the where we have to, in which directory I want to work it out. So to exit from the prompt, we can use a q off, and so for running the script programs, we're going to use file name.r. And so the basic data types in R should be like C and Java in R. So the variables are not going to be declared. It should be entirely different. So it should look similar to the Python programming language. So, but in C and program Java, we have to declare the variables and we have to be initialized. So that and all is not needed in our program. That much easy. Just no need of declaring the data types. And the variables that are assigned in the form of R objects, and the data types are of R object become the type of the variable itself. So some of the data types that I'm going to use new to us in our programming is vectors, and then factors, data frames, and lists. So these two almost all appear in C and then Java as well as in Python. And list may appear in Python, vectors and factors, data frames. So these three are the new in our programming data types. So if you look at this vector data types, uh, so let it be have logical. So logical means it may be either true or false, and numeric it may be 12.3 and values, so that is going to follow the digits, and integers, complex, and then character. So if I want to know this what type of variable it is, I want to know, so we're going to have a function called class. So if I'm going to write the print of class of v, so initially I'm going to get v is equal to true. I want to check it out whether it is true or false. So for that, what I have to do, it should be represented as logical data type. I don't want to know what type of variable it is. So similarly, I initialize v is equal to l. So I want to know what type of data type it is I want to know. So for that, so print of class of v is there. If I know it is going to be shown as integer. Similarly, if I want to know this, so it should be complex. So complex data type can also be easily printable, can evaluate in R programming. And so there is a difference between this one and this one. If I'm going to give in double quotations, So it's going to be shown character only. So normally uh, the normal representation of character should be single quotations. So if I'm going to give a string in double quotation, it should be shown it as a character only. There should not be any string data type here. So vector. So to create the vector with more than one element, so how can I able to do that? So we're going to have a function called CR function, which is going to be combines the elements into vector. Okay, suppose normally I have some elements red, green, and yellow. So these are the characters initially. I want to save in the form of a vector. So how can I able to do that? For that, we're going to have a function called CR function. So apple, C of red, green, and yellow. If I'm going to print, so print of class, then it should be a vector itself. And non-character values also be presented as the character type, so C of apple, red, 5, and true. So something should be logical, integer, and then string. So it should be also produces as a characters or vector of all the elements. So multiple elements vector. So here this one can able to generate through the colon operator. Like suppose if I'm going to mention the 5 is to 13, that means I'm going to generate the vector of elements up to 13. Okay. So similarly, I want to generate the sequence of 6.6 to 12.6. Right, so 6.6, 6.7, 6 point up to 12.6 it can able to generate. Similarly, in the similar fashion, if I'm going to write a difference of 3.8 to 11.4, so the final element does not the sequence, it should be discarded. So using the sequence operator, so use this is the other kind of operator where you can able to generate the sequence of number with some difference I want to generate it. So let's take an example. So print a sequence of 5 comma 9 by 4. That means with a difference of 0.4 I can able to generate the value here. Okay, so like 5, so next one 5.4, 5.8, and 6.2, 6.6. Like this I can able to generate up to 9. So this should be the incrementing the values from the sequence. So initially I want to generate empty vector, so how it should be, so numeric of, so it should be an empty one. So if I'm going to assign x of equal to -5, then x should be printable in the vector. So how I'm going to accessing the vector elements. So here the elements of vectors are going to be accessed through indexing. So normally in arrays, so how can able to access the values like 0, 1, 2, 3, right? So 10, 20, 30, and then 40. So index is going to be start with 0. So here also we can able to access the element based on this indexing only, right? And square brackets is going to be used for indexing, and indexing starts with 1. So in our programming, it should be starts with index number 1. So normally in C, Java, it should be going to start with 0. So giving the negative index in the index drop the element from the result also, and so that means we can true, false, and then 0 can also be used for the indexing. So accessing the vector elements using position. Suppose this is the vector I created initially using CR function. So t is equal to, it means what we called as C of 8 days in a week. Suppose if I want to access, so what should be write it out? So u should be another vector, so that should be t of 2, 3, 6. So this should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. So 2 means Monday, Tuesday and Friday. So these values are going to get the output here. So similarly, if I'm going to write, so V of T of C of true, false, false, true, that means how the output should look like this. So print of V, so it should also be printed in this form. And print excluding 2 and 5th index, so how to write it? So C of -2 and -5. So if I'm going to minus here, so this should be the excluding part, and if I'm going to give normal 6, then it should be including part of that. And then vector manipulation. So the vectors of the same length can be added, subtracted, multiplied and divided. And so we are going to have two types of vectors, so v1 and v2. So that means so vector is this and another vector is this. So how can I able to add? So we are going to have a method called add of method. So add of something. So add dot result equal to v1 plus v2. So that the two vectors are going to add it of the first two elements of the two vectors. So that means 3 plus 4, 8 plus 11, 4 plus 0, 5 plus 8, 0 plus 1 and 11 plus 2. So the both is going to be added here and the result is going to be this one. Similarly, if I want to subtract, so sub dot result of v1 minus v2. So the values are going to be subtracted from the first vector and result is going to be here. And multi, so for multiplication it should be multi dot result. So v1 into v2. And similarly for division we can have dv dot result. So v1 divided by v2. So like this we can able to print this addition, subtraction, multiplication, division operations on the vector method. So how we're going to sort the elements of the vector. So for that we're going to have a method called sort of function. So this is the vector initially I'm going to have. So I want to sort it out either in ascending order or descending order. So descending and ascending order. So that means I can able to represent to high to low, and there should be ascending descending order, and for ascending order it should be low to high. So like this I can able to represent it. So we're going to have a method called sort of. So sort of where the elements are going to be sorted in either ascending or descending order. And so for that what I have to do is, so sort of v means simply is going to sort. So if I'm going to make decreasing order, then I have to put it as true, otherwise it should be false. So this is the attribute what I'm going to be used in sort of method. Next concept is that arrays. So arrays, the data types which can be used to store the data in more than 2 dimensions. For example, if we create an array of dimension of 2, 3, 4, then it should be create 4 rectangular matrices, each with 2 rows and 3 columns. So similarly, the array can able to store only one data type. So already you know that in C and Java it should be able to store that in only single data type. So that means in array I can able to store either integers or I can able to use floating point values or I can able to use strings only. So arrays can store only one data type, and array is going to be created with the array of function. So example creates an array of 2 3 by 3 matrices, each with 3 rows and 3 columns. So example is going to be created an array of 2 3 by 3 matrices, each with 3 rows and 3 columns. And For this vector 1 and vector 2, so here going to have 5, 9, 3 is the thing, and vector 2 it should be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and 15. So take these vectors as input to an array, and result is going to be used here. So array of both the things I'm going to be combined with the dimensions of 3, 3, 1. So next one is how we're going to naming the columns and rows here. So initially I'm giving some names to rows and columns for matrix and array of dimension names parameter. So dim names is the parameter I can able to use for representing that. So vector 1 should be 593 and another vector is this one. And so the column names what I'm going to specify is column 1, column 2 and column 3, and the row names what I'm going to give it as row 1, row 2 and row 3. So the matrix names it should be what we call it as C of matrix 1 and matrix 2. So these two inputs are going to be input of that one, and so the result should be array of C vector vector 3 and dimension should be of matrix 3, 3, 2. So that means we can able to store in these dimensions with a list of row names and then column names. So once these two vectors are going to be combined and to be stored in the form of array and with the dimensions of this 3 by 3 matrix. So next one, manipulating the array elements. So for this manipulating this, so we're going to have two vectors I'm taking here, vector 1 and vector 2. And for the array 1, so what I'm going to have should be is so array of vector 1 and vector 2 of the dimension 3, 3, 2, and vector 3 should be another thing I'm going to consider. And finally I'm going to print the vector 4. So this is the another vector I'm taking. So finally I'm taking the 4 vectors here, and again in array 2 I'm going to store vector 1 and vector 2. So matrix of the form, so one is should be array 1 and matrix 2 should be array 2. So that means here going to combine this. Sorry, here it should be 3 and then 4. So this is the array vector of this 2 vector 2, and for array 2 it should be 3 and 4. Finally I'm going to come, this should be the matrix 1 matrix 2, and finally I'm going to add it and then I'm going to store it in the result. So like this I can able to manipulate the array elements. So OR matrices also be considered as OR object, so which is a two-dimensional array, and this one is going to be created by matrix of function. So the matrix of data and row and column by row and dimension name is going to be considered. So here the matrix name should be 3:14 with rows and then row and then by row true, and the print of m should be considered. And so for the other matrix n I'm going to consider 3, 14 number of rows and number of by row should be false. So finally I'm taking the row names and column names and I'm going to write it a matrix of 3 and 14 values, no row and by row it should be 10. So the dimension should be list of row names and column names finally printed. So in this fashion you can able to print the matrices. So next one, accessing the elements of matrix. So for that, so the elements of matrix can be accessed by column and row index of element. So the row names and column names. So here the row names should be this one and column name is this one. So if I'm going to write it as matrix of say 13, no row and by row should be true, so that the dimension with the names. And suppose if I want to access the third column of first row, so this should be row indication and this should be the column indication. So here I'm going to have first row and third, so that means I'm going to access the element of third column and first row. So accessing third column and first row I want it. That means this file icon access is for this. Similarly, if I want to write 3 or 4 comma 2, that means fourth second column and fourth row. So this element I want to access, then I have to make use of this. So accessing only the entire row, then I have to write so 2. Accessing only the column, it should be 3. So like this, I can able to get the output. And next one is should be the factors. So factors are the data type which is going to be categorize the data and then store it as levels, and they can store both these strings and integer. So normally this is going to be useful in columns which have limited number of unique values. So like male, female, and true or false like this. So the factors they should be created by using a factor function. So this factor function is used to take the input, so like in the form of vector. So data here, see our function by make use. So print data. So print is dot factor of data. So applying the factor function here. So next, as factor data is the variable, so as a factor data, so the rules or everything is going to be stored in factor data, and finally we are going to print. So is factor of factor data. So what will happen? So in initial line we can able to get print the result, print of data, and is this of the time is factor data? No. So that's why it is going to get it as false here. So what I'm doing, I'm printing this into factor of data as a factor of data, and when it's going to print is factor of factor data true. So that's why it is going to print in the form of factor data. So factors in the data frame is another thing which is going to be used here. So on creating a data frame with a column of text data, so the OR treats the text column as categorical data and then create the factors on it. So here create a vectors for data frame. So how to create it? So I'm going to create the height and then create a vector, and then under vector this. So I'm going to send the output, input in the form of data frame. So data frame of height, weight, and gender. So these three things I'm going to be considered, and it is going to be stored input or data. So the print of input data is going to be considered, and then print factor is a function I'm going to apply it. So input data of only gender. So it prints only the gender thing. So input of data of gender. So like this I can able to print the factors in data frame. So this is the data frame. So I'm going to club this height, weight, gender as one data frame. So within this data frame, I'm only considering only the part of the gender. So that's why I'm going to write it as a factor of input of data gender. So like this, I can able to generate various basics of our programming. So our programming is the thing which is going to be used as a language, which is created by Ross Saka, and the first two characters of the authors will be treated as R programming, and for the installation we're going to have R32 for Windows and then Linux, and for the Linux we're going to have R binaries is going to be used. So by use of command can able to install in Linux, and for the plottings I have to make use of this plotrix. So some of the basics sentence what can able to use. So this is the way of initializing a string, and some of the basic helpful command that is going to be used here should be help, word, get, w, offset, wq, and then source. So these are the some of the basic command that is going to be used here. And our data types, so normally are going to have arrays and matrix. Apart from that, we're going to have C vectors, lists, factors, and then data types. So how can able to create, I want to know so what type of variable it is. So by make use of this class. So class is the function which can able to know what type of data it is, whether it is a logic, numerical, integer, like this. And vector, so how can able to create the vector element by use of C function. C of function is the thing which is going to be generate the vector elements. And multiple vectors is going to be generated by using colon operator. So this is the concept you have to make. And as seeing vector elements, so how we going to as seeing the vector elements. So by make use of CF function, so we can able to show in the form of indexing, we can able to access the vector elements. And vector manipulation, so we can able to perform addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And vector element sorting, so we can able to sort the element by using sorting of method. And next concept what I have seen is that arrays. So arrays is going to be generated by use of array of function. So where you can able to combine these vectors also the form of an array. And naming columns should also be done by make use of dim names parameter. So with the dim names parameter, you can able to list the row names and then column names. And next one, manipulating array elements. So for manipulating array elements, we can able to use how we're going to manipulate the content where in the form of arrays the matrix also. So R matrices. So this one is going to be created by make use of matrix of function, and this matrix of function is going to be used. Should be in the form of matrix. You can be able to generate it. So can able to specify the rows and by row and size of matrix, rows and then columns, right? So accessing the elements should also be done with the aim of the row and then column index value of matrix. And factors is the thing which is going to be generated by make use of this factor of function here. So by make use of this factor of function, you can able to generate. So whether it is a fact, it may be what should be, it should be a data of a vector or maybe a factor. I want to know it. So for that we have to make use of this is factor of data. I want to check it out whether it is a factor or not, or it may be normal vector. So I can also be convert that into by make use of factor function. So factors in the frame also be considered. So data frame should be a collection of vectors where you can able to extract some part of this in the form of factor also. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.